Previously on Funny Science Fiction.
There was that day, right behind Bill. I'm going to try to find the seam between Real Hair Begins and where that fabulous piece he's wearing starts.
Hello, my name is Jed Brophy, and you're listening to the Funny Science Fiction Podcast.
The podcast that reminds you, don't blink, don't forget, don't breathe, don't think, and to just call the doctor. Today's guest has been in all 6 of the Lord of the Rings themed movies, so both the Hobbit movies and trilogy and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. You may know him best as his character Nori, the kleptomaniac dwarf, but you may also know him from King Kong, District 9, the Shannara Chronicles, among other things that he has been participating in. So glad to have you here, Jed. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to be on your show. I've heard so much about it, mostly good.
Well, that's good. Wow, it's getting all the way to New Zealand. That's scary. Okay.
Yeah.
We mentioned some of the things in that little introduction. We mentioned some of the things that you've been a part of. Now, a couple of these universes that you've been part of, the Lord of the Rings universe, the King Kong storyline, are pretty big storylines, and you know they have a lot of lore around them and a lot of history and large fan bases. Perhaps you could share with us what it was like for you to step into such a high-profile movie roles with an extremely popular and varied universes.
Well, I grew up on a sheep farm in this country, and I read a lot of books, Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit being 2 of them. And I'd seen an early version of King Kong, obviously, at the movies myself. I'm just lucky that I grew up in the country that Peter Jackson decided to make films, and that I'd done movies with him early on in his career. So, you know, he already knew me. There's a lot of fortune in our industry in terms of being Johnny on the spot. And I just, you know, I feel very lucky that I was here when he made both those projects and that I'd worked with him previously. But yeah, it was. I know that for all of us working on Lord of the Rings, it was a bit daunting, knowing how big the fan base was and how vociferous they were in terms of their opinions and their readership, and wanting to get it right. And we're pretty pleased with the outcome.
I was, so.
Yeah, definitely. They are my top favorite movies.
Yeah, I remember when the extended versions came out, and the originals were already kind of long, and then the extended versions came out. My wife was like, "You're going to watch those?" I'm like, "You bet your sweet bottom dollar I am." I couldn't watch them fast enough.
I will sit here even though my butt is numb, and I will continue watching them.
Exactly.
So, as you've mentioned, there's almost always a difference between the books and the film. How did you feel about the changing of the last movie of The Hobbit, kind of shifting away from Tolkien's original vision?
Yeah, I have to be careful what I say because I'm very proud of the work that we did, but it did feel like the dwarves busted out of, Erebor, and then most of us kind of took a seat and had a cup of tea while Thorin and Philly and Killy and Dwalin and Balin did all the fighting. But we sort of just ran out of time, I think. I think Pete always imagined that we might come back and like with Lord of the Rings, maybe be able to pick up some of that stuff. But we're trying to cram too much in there at the end. Maybe that is. I'm not really sure of why that was. But yeah, I'm a purist like a lot of people. I would have preferred myself if it had kind of just been 13 dwarves and a wizard and a hobbit bumbling their way through Middle Earth trying to get to a place, and then having a bit of a fight at the end of it. But it became a whole other thing.
Yeah.
No, that's okay. I think it's one thing to be a fan. It's another thing to be a part of that universe, and I think that allows you to have opinions on both sides. You know, you're in a unique position that most fans don't get to be part of. You get to have an opinion as a working actor who was part of it, and then you get to have an opinion as a fan expressing their fans' viewpoint. So I think that's a really cool place to be.
Yeah, it's all very well to have an opinion, but it's just my opinion.
Sure.
You know, I've loved everything that's in the books, and for me, one of the things about the original 3 films, Lord of the Rings, was no scarring of the Shire. I found that very difficult to get my head around not having, but you just can't. You know, as they say, if Peter has his own version, it will be 85.5 days long. you can't have everything.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with that. We should have a version that is 85.5 days long to watch. That would be great. And those of us that love the films, we would happily do it.
I would do
But
it.
for studios, they can't envisage the fan base really wanting that, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I have to remember too, each of those books were so big, and trying to get all those conversations and all the parts that were crucial to the storylines into the movies. And like you said, there was a lot to cram in there. And so I think he did a wonderful job with what he was trying to accomplish and what he was trying to add and deliver to the fan base. So I think that's amazing.
And to some extent, Tolkien overwrote everything. I mean, he put excruciating amounts of details into things, and you can't add all of that detail. And I mean, even when they pulled from the Silmarillion, it's impossible to get all of his details. He wrote an entire language. He created an entire world. Things are going to have to give.
Yeah, it wasn't just that he was taught. He wouldn't tell you that something was blue. He would tell you what shade of blue, what angle the sun was at when he found out it was blue. All these different things. So there was a lot to pull from.
It was. It does amazing things for your imagination, that kind of writing. It means that when you've got a picture in your head, you're really creating a very vivid landscape. What I think that Peter did really well was he and Andrew Lesnie, the cinematographer especially, was put those colours and that look on the screen in a way that actually satisfied the majority of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've said that obviously you worked with Peter Jackson a lot on the 6 Hobbit or 6 Lord of the Rings and Hobbit movies, and at least 7 movies with Peter Jackson.
Yeah.
If
King
not
Kong,
more. I mean,
at least.
I'm sure there's more.
Yeah.
But Peter, like you've talked about, is known for his vision and expressing that visually in films. So what is it like to work with him on set? And do you have a favorite memory of him that you could share with us?
Yeah, I have a few favorite memories, really. I think the first film I did for him was a zombie movie called Brain Dead, and just watching his inventiveness, coming up with ways of shooting stuff practically, because there wasn't any computer generated effects in New Zealand at that time. And if they were, they certainly went up to the standard where you want to have it on screen in a big film. So watching his inventiveness and his creativity and his organic nature of directing, where he sees something and then is able to tweak it to ramp it up to something that actually starts to really hum. That hadn't really changed between doing that film back in 1991, 92 and working on Lord of the Rings in 2000, 2001, 1999 onwards. He still retained that same enthusiasm for making pictures, his same energy and his same inventiveness. So yeah, every day at work with Peter is fantastic. I'd work for him for nothing, but don't tell him that.
We will ask this not to be shared with Peter Jackson. Anybody listening, please do not share this with Peter Jackson. Jed needs another paycheck. We need to make sure that happens.
Yeah, I mean, he's a genius, and his true genius is surrounding himself with other people who are equally adept at creating amazing visions for people, and they're passionate about stories and making them as visually entertaining, but also having that kind of dramatic substance as well. So he surrounds himself with good people.
Yeah, I think one of the great things about anybody who's can be seen as a storyteller is their world building. Mm-hmm. And I view Peter Jackson as a storyteller. He's somebody when he lays out, even if it's clearly somebody else's story, like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, or you go to a story like King Kong, where that story originated with somebody else, but now he's taken it and he has built this beautiful imaginative world around it where you see everything going on. It's amazing what he's been able to do, and I find that very fascinating personally.
Yeah, he's a fan. I mean, he's always said, and I'm quoting his own quote, that he makes films that he would like to watch, and he was a very passionate film watcher as a young man, and so wanting to make King Kong, I think he made his own version, a short film, aged 11. He's always wanted to make that film. He's been living with that story since he was a young man, and it's the same for me. I grew up seeing Western landscapes and in fantasy landscapes on the farm. That was my kind of, I was riding around on a horse pretending that I was all of those fabulous, famous people from legend. And I think that in this industry and want to do fantasy, you have to have that as your root. You have to have a passion for it to begin with.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
speaking of having a passion, we have a fan base that follows us and is part of our Facebook group, which just hit 117,000 members.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really growing. It's taken off just fantastically over the last year. And one of our page followers has a question for you. His name is John Drake.
Thanks. Yep.
John Drake asked us to ask you. He said, "I've just started reading The Hobbit to my 6-year-old boy. What accent should I give to Nori?"
Well, in the movie, I played him. He's from kind of Berkshire, South London, kind of talks to me a bit like that. Like, take Adam Brown's accent and then just kind of make it a bit more London.
All right, there you go. John, if you're watching this, hopefully you are, you'll have heard the fact that you need to give him an Adam Brown accent with a little bit of South London. There you go.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Because he's a bit more dodgy than Ori.
You froze up at he's a bit more dodgy than Ori.
That's right. That's all I was saying.
Yeah, we're good. We're done there.
Yeah.
So it is.
All right.
It's kind of a universal fact that when you're filming a movie and you're on set or on location for days, weeks, long hours, that funny things happen that you don't get to see in the movie. And I mean, I know that there are backstories of things that happened with Viggo Mortensen during Lord of the Rings, whether it was him and Orlando Bloom not being able to keep up speed correctly or when Viggo broke his toe. But what was one of your favorite or your funniest memories of working with the cast and crew of either The Hobbit or of Lord of the Rings?
Oh, look, we probably on The Hobbit, I would say we had Martin Freeman, who was like a walking prankster. He kept us entertained, and he wasn't the only one. We were lucky enough to have the fabulous comedian Billy Connolly there, who would regale us with stories at lunchtime. And I do remember one day with Martin, Billy Connolly, and Stephen Fry all sitting around the table telling jokes. We just didn't want to go back to work. We didn't care about The Hobbit anymore. We just wanted to sit around the table hearing those three make us laugh.
Oh my goodness.
Martin was an exceptionally good table tennis player, and Mark Hadler and I would play him, and various stunties would play him. And Martin always seemed like he wasn't a great player, but actually it turned out that he could have represented his country. He was that good. So he was a bit of a table tennis shark and would lose outrageously. And then just before the take, before they wanted him on set, he would just thrash everyone. In terms of things that happened to me, I had a 7.5-hour makeup as Shaku, and one of the makeup artists, which I've since found out who it was, but I won't name him here. His name is Dan something. He wrote "I love Viggo" on my butt cheeks, and then took a photo and gave Viggo that photo. So legend has it. Because we all loved working with Viggo so much. We would come in and say, "Oh, Viggo's so cool. Viggo's amazing, and we love Viggo." And I think that people got sick of hearing it. So it's the only time I ever went to sleep was that day. Never would I ever do that.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, it was. It was funny.
You can only imagine how much time would go into all of the dwarf's hair and makeup, and
Yeah.
because there's a couple that it's like you see them out of makeup and you're like, oh, that's not at all what I thought that person looked like.
No. Yeah, it was about 4 hours altogether, probably 3.5. There'd be an hour and a half of the prosthetic, which was a forehead and a nose and the ears and a big kind of head to make our heads look bigger. But then there was probably about an hour and a half of wiggage and beardage, mostly yak hair. I think there's a yak somewhere in Eastern Mongolia who's not that happy that he's in the movie industry. But
a little
worked
cold
for us. He is a little cold, yeah. They tell me I'm in The Hobbit, but I
So speaking of makeup and prosthetics and all that stuff, so clearly Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, even the Shannara Chronicles, you appear in heavy makeup, full costume, all that kind of stuff. Clearly, to be able to play these roles, but
Yeah.
some actors have difficulty with doing that. Whether it's they break out, there's skin issues, other things along those lines. But you seem to, I'm going to assume that you enjoy playing those types of roles for getting into the deep dive of the characters, or is it just, hey, this is the job and this is what I'm going to do?
It started out as that. I when they said they were casting Lord of the Rings, I imagined myself as Aragorn or Faramir or someone fabulous like that. But I'd already done prosthetics in both Brain Dead and Heavenly Creatures, and I know that Weta Workshop, Richard Taylor especially, and Peter, were looking for people that could come through the prosthetic and actually create a character that was three-dimensional and interesting. And so there was a couple of go-to people, myself and Stephen Ure, who'd done it before. And it is hard to say to people, no, I don't want to do prosthetics anymore, because it is a challenge and I do enjoy it. But you have to tell people that you're in it. People don't recognize you in the street. And I think that's the key. I quite like my anonymity. And I quite like the fact that I don't necessarily get overexposed or that well known. I live in a small community, and I like being able to walk around and just be normal. And it is a challenge. The 5-hour makeup, it's not great. Getting up at 2 a.m. isn't the most fun. But to be able to bring something that is that heavily made up and have that kind of subtlety that you can bring to it, it is a real challenge. And I'm up for the challenge. I do a lot of acting where I'm not in prosthetics as well. But those are the big ones, those are the ones that people know.
Right.
Yeah.
So you played quite a few characters in the Lord of the Rings, from a
Rohirrim
writer.
Rohirrim.
You played one of the elves, Snaga, Sharku, and an inspection orc, and one of the Nazgul. And then in The Hobbit, you played Nori. So which one was your favorite to play, or which?
It's tricky, eh? I love them all. I think probably Nori, because I got to be part of the company. That was special, being part of the group of dwarves that is named in the book, who got to go on the journey. That's a hard thing to beat. When you grow up reading something that is one of your favorite books, and then you get to be one of those characters. That's the gift. That's the gift that the actor is looking for, I think. I'm sure that the characters from Harry Potter kind of feel the same. When you're playing those central characters, even if it's a small part, the fact that you're actually one of the people who goes on that journey and gets to have that camaraderie with people, that stays with you. I mean, all of us that play the dwarves, we still stay in touch. We stay in touch with Ian, and we stay in touch with Martin as much as we can. Those friendships are lifelong. And I think it is a job, being an actor. You want it to be enjoyable. I enjoyed all of the parts in Lord of the Rings equally. I think the hardest job was being a Nazgul. It was 7 layers of cloth that we wore with a big prosthetic hump, and we shot in the summer. It was very hot with that layers of black. And we were galloping at full speed with very little vision. So it was very dangerous, very exciting, but also quite a difficult gig.
Sounds like
I couldn't see.
It does sound like quite the challenge.
Yeah. The horses did an amazing job. I bought one of the Rohan horses at the end of filming, and he's 24 now. He's one of the last remaining Rohirrim horses. They were such characters, and they don't get talked about that much, but they really are the heroes of the films. They didn't get to go to catering with us. They didn't get drivers. They didn't have people doing their own makeup. They kind of looked after themselves, but they were brilliant characters in the films.
What was the name of your horse?
His name is Seb, and his racing name is Frodo, funnily enough. In between principal photography and reshoots, guy Carl Taylor, who rode him on set before I bought him, he raced him as Frodo.
That's awesome.
That's
Awesome.
But unless he was chasing orcs, he didn't go very fast.
I'm so glad to know that he gets a happy life after filming too. To know that he's yours. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, the paddock where we shot the Mummicles, we shot a whole lot of reshoots in QE2 Park, and we shot the Mummicles getting shot and coming down there, the big elephants. He still in that paddock. So he's living in one of the paddocks that we shot the film in, which I think is also cool.
Yeah, it is. That is neat.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So obviously Tolkien's writing is near and dear to your heart.
It
But
is.
Is there something else, sci-fi, book, podcast, movie, or franchise that's your favorite? And it's okay if you say this podcast is your favorite. We're totally fine with that.
Yeah. There's this podcast called the Funny Sci-Fi Fantasy Podcast. I'm pretty sure I've got that wrong now that I've said it for a second time. But those guys are really good. It's my favorite podcast. But I think one of my favorite book series is actually by a writer called Raymond E. Feast, who wrote The Magician and the Riftwar saga. And I really, really like his work. I'm not sure if he'll ever allow anyone to make it into a series, but it's like Tolkien, it's a very imaginative world. And he sort of, a lot of those writers pay tribute to Tolkien being the godfather or the grandfather. And that without Tolkien's work, he probably wouldn't have become a fantasy of his work. So there's a lot of fantasy books that I could envisage be made into films, which I'd like to be a part of. If anyone's listening.
There you go. Excellent.
So
Yeah.
oftentimes the funny of things, because we have a Facebook group called the Funny Science Fiction, and it's basically filled with just memes for days, and the funny usually comes from a mix between this universe and this universe, or a cross between two elements. If you were to play Nori in another nerdiverse, which universe would you like to see Nori played in?
I think he'd be a wonderful addition to the X-Men. That hair, you can just, if that hair was sharpened, he could do a lot of damage, and dwarves are small, one of those, like Wolverine could probably carry Nori under his arm and literally launch him towards the enemy. And he's a thief, he could probably break into places and do a bit of breaking into some places that they need to get into. I know Ant-Man's pretty good as a thief too, but I think Nori would give him a run for his money.
There you go. Use his hair to pick locks.
Use his hair to pick locks. Use his good looks to hoodwink people. Yeah, he'd be really useful because the dwarves are vicious.
Right.
You've got the Beast, you've got Wolverine, you've got two characters with really cool hair. Why not a third?
Totally.
Things are better in threes.
Yeah.
That's what I hear. Things are better in threes. So, all right. So, Jed, we've come to a portion of our show where we like to play a little bit of a quiz, a little bit of a game show with our guests, and we're hoping that you'll play along with us. So there'll be a total of 5 questions. They're all Lord of the Rings based.
I certainly will.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you get 3 questions correct, we'd like to send you one of these I gave to the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans mugs. Okay.
Fantastic.
If you get 4 questions correct, we'd like to send you this book. If I back it up enough, you actually get to see it. It's called Custodians of the Cosmos, and it's written by Drayton Allen. Yeah. It's about it's about a young man who wanted to join Starfleet and the Star Trek universe, but didn't quite make it, so he joined as a custodian, and he now boldly cleans up after those who boldly just went. And so there's a whole story.
I like that.
Yeah. So that's if you get 4 correct, we'll send you the mug and the book. However, there has to be some kind of consequence if there's a chance for you to get good things. We like to call it a fun sequence. If you don't get at least 3 questions correct, we'd like to take your picture and make a meme out of you and throw it onto our Facebook group. Would that be okay if we get to that point?
Absolutely.
All right. Very well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. We're going to let Nick and Kathleen quiz you.
I just realized I don't know which series this question comes from.
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
That's a good start.
Not really, but yeah, we'll go with it.
How many hobbits initially set out from the Shire? Was it 2, 3, 4, or 5?
2. Sam and Frodo.
Yes.
Very good.
Question 2. Who rides ahead with Frodo to Rivendell after he is stabbed with a sword at Weathertop? Is it Arwen, Aragorn, Eowyn, or Gandalf?
It's Arwen, mother of Eldarion, played by my son.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I know that. That's cool.
That's
Interesting.
a little bit of nerd knowledge we did not have before today.
There you go.
Were
There
you
you
one of the Were you one of the Nazgul chasing him down?
I was. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
The deal was if we touched the white horse, we got a dozen of beer. So we really try to touch the horse, not get Frodo. But don't tell anyone that.
Beers are always important. I get you.
That's right. Especially
Beer.
in Middle Earth.
There you go. All right, 2 for 2.
What is the name of the volcano that the ring is thrown into? Is it Osgiliath?
Osgiliath.
You want to just do this one, Ken?
You might just have to do the answers for him.
Osgiliath, Cirith Ungol, Minas Tirith, or Barad-dûr?
Say the second one again.
Cirith Ungol, Minas Tirith, Osgiliath, or Barad-dûr?
I'd have to say Barad-dûr, although I think it had a different name, didn't it?
It is Barad-dûr.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's only referenced as Barad-dûr a couple times. It's just because they always just say that they're taking it to Mordor. So
That's right. Yeah, there you go.
So good on you for getting it. That's 3 for 3.
Woo!
You get yourself a mug, sir.
Yay!
Question 4. What race did the Nazgul used to be? Hobbits,
Me.
dwarves, elves, or men?
They used to be men. They were the kings. Some of them the Numenorean kings, in fact. So yeah, they were the kings of men, and then they were subverted by the rings that they were given, made by Celebrimbor, and controlled by the One Ring that the Maya turned evil person Sauron.
There you go.
Had.
Well, you're 4 for 4, so that means we send you both of these.
There we go. Fantastic.
The Lord of the Rings nerdery is strong with him. I love it.
All right, so this one, so the 5th question is just like, as we like to call it, just for funsies. Go ahead, Nick.
How many Nazgul are there? 7, 8, 10, or 9?
There are 9. Although in the film there were 14 of us playing 9, but yeah, there were 9. Yeah. They called the 9 in the film, actually.
Yes, they are.
The Nazgul, the Black Riders, the 9. Yeah, I actually played one of the Nazgul on a Fell Beast as well, when the Fell Beast is looking for Frodo, Sam, and Gollum going through the dead marshes. The first time you see the big Fell Beast with the Nazgul on, that's actually me.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, I
More
ride
nerd
flying.
More nerd knowledge we did not have before
snakes
today.
too.
I like
Yeah,
this.
nerd knowledge.
We like nerd knowledge.
Yeah.
It's
My
fun.
mother-in-law cannot watch the fell beasts. They scare her so much. She looks away every time. Like she hears the shriek even, and she's like, "No, I'm done."
All right,
There's a bit
sir.
of nerd knowledge.
Yeah, go for
You
it.
might not have known is that the shrieking voices are all done by Fran Walsh.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, the Nazgul were voiced by her.
I did not. That's cool.
That is
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. You're 3 for 3 on the nerd knowledge here today, Jed. This is much appreciated.
I was really hoping you were
You're
a big
welcome.
fan.
And you went 5 for 5 on the questions, 3 for 3 on the nerd knowledge. You're racking them up over here today, sir.
I'm knocking it out of the park.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Well, Jed, thank you so much for being on the show today. Where can people go to find out more about all your previous acting work and what you're working on now?
I don't really. I guess I when I'm working on something, I post on Twitter at Brophy Jed, and I've got an Instagram account, Jed Brophy. IMBD, you can always look up that and see what work I've done and what work's coming up. But yeah, I must get on to, I have a website, but I haven't really done anything with it, but I must get onto that. I'm just a bit slack, as most Kiwis are, at promoting ourselves. But certainly I'm actually flying away today to shoot a trailer for a film. It's made by the same director as a movie called Blue Moon that I did with Mark Hadlow in 2018, which you can get on Vimeo on demand, iTunes or Amazon Prime. Blue Moon it is. And it's a little film that we made back in 2018 after we'd worked on The Hobbit together. We decided we'd like to do a movie, and a guy called Steph Harris, who's a writer, wrote a great script, which we did. So it's a little two-hander that you can have a look at. And then today I go down to start work on the follow-up to that.
Nice.
It's called Swan Song. Yeah.
Okay.
We shoot that in November. But
Awesome.
we're going down this weekend to shoot a little trailer for it.
Nice.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
We're gonna make sure that we have all of those, your Twitter, your Instagram, everything linked in our description so that people can find you and find all of the other things that you've done so they can enjoy the work that you've put into all of these wonderful pieces.
Thank you very much.
No, absolutely. And so we just want to remind everybody who's watching that subscribing is the single most important thing you can do to help us get more amazing guests like Jed Brophy here today, who is clearly distributing the greatest nerd knowledge of all time, and give you funny moments to listen to. So please subscribe. It's going to help more than you're ever going to know. And go check out Jed's work, not just on The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, which, you know, clearly we don't care if you do, because that's really good stuff. And we're thrilled that he was able to do that and share some of that nerd knowledge with us today. But go check out Blue Moon and some of the other stuff that he's got coming up as well. And then also we wanted to remind you that if you're not happy with the content of our videos, all you have to do is submit in single form, of course, to Gandalf the Grey or white, because really it depends on when you're submitting, before or after Labor Day. You know, there's that whole don't wear white thing. Either way, Gandalf will force the object of your complaint to fly on the firework dragons made for the Hobbit Festival. It'll be fun for somebody.
Thanks again, Jed.
You're welcome.
Bye, everyone,
You're
and
welcome.
thanks for watching.
Thank you very much, guys.
Our show is brought to you by our charity sponsor, the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans Fund, which supports the Wish Upon a Teen Foundation that helps out sick kids when they need it most. And just imagine the comfort you'll give Red Shirt crewman number 23. He'll know that when he puts on the red shirt and 16 minutes into the siege of Helm's Deep, that he didn't leave his family destitute and without hope, because the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans Fund has his back and his axe.
On behalf of the rest of the hosts of Funny Science Fiction, we'd like to thank you for listening to this episode. If you'd like to be a guest on one of our future episodes, please contact us by means of our Facebook group, Funny Science Fiction. You can find us on Twitter or Instagram using the handle @FunnySciFi, or you can go to DraytonAllen.com and click the Contact Me link at the bottom of the page. Thanks again. Hope you enjoyed the episode.